I'm having a crisis. I saw one dude on Twitter thread say that if you like anything Nintendo related, you should crawl in a hole and die. So I need to get anything Nintendo related off my shelf. Maybe they'll let this one slide. Nintendo is for babies, am I right, lads? There's a mentality going around some areas of the gaming community that Nintendo only makes games for kids, or at the very most teenagers. You rarely see any of their games go past PEGI 12 or T. The only real exception to that is Bayonetta, which is more of a second party game anyways. Nintendo sees that more as a second cousin you try and avoid at family gatherings rather than its firstborn child. This goes back to the 90s as well, when they heavily restricted gore in the SNES version of Mortal Kombat, while the Genesis let you input a cheat code to get the full gore experience. Nowadays, PlayStation's the more adult orientated game company, at least in my mind. You don't release a game like God of War and then turn around and advertise your system to a child. Except that's exactly what PlayStation does. But Xbox is sort of in between. Xbox feels like what you get a 12-year-old child that's absolutely desperate to play his older brother's mature games. Something that sort of feels like the real thing, but a little watered down to be suitable for kids. It's like when you get a kid a J2O when he wants a Stella Artois. And obviously that's not to insult Xbox, it's a very respectful console, and Microsoft's a great company that's doing a lot to advance gaming with services like Game Pass and xCloud. But it's very obvious Sony and Nintendo have the upper hand when it comes to major IPs. Like, look at what happens when you ask the average person to name an Xbox IP that isn't Halo or from a company that they bought. The car? But where did this all begin? Xbox have been mainstays in the console market by a mile, with Microsoft officially entering the console race during the 6th generation. They released so late into 6th gen that Dreamcast had already been discontinued by now, which prompted Microsoft to ask Sega if they could develop Dreamcast compatibility for the Xbox. But these talks fell apart when they discussed the implementation of SegaNet, Dreamcast online services. This is because it likely would have clashed with Xbox Live, Microsoft's own paid online game service that was in development alongside the console. The Xbox had been talked about by Bill Gates since 1999, but it was officially unveiled at CES 2001. By Dwayne The Rock Johnson. You know, The Rock, the WWE wrestler, the actor, the Xbox unveiler. He does anything. It is cool, Mum, that The Rock is there. This is sort of what I'm talking about, at least of Xbox in the 2000s. It feels more like they're trying to fit in or appear cool and extreme to market to teenagers. All PlayStation needed to do was slap a 2 in front of the name and said, yeah, it plays Armored Core 2, buy it. Meanwhile, Nintendo were too busy sticking crayons up their noses to listen to what was happening, so they're pretty much excluded from this conversation. The Xbox launched on November 15th, 2001 in America, but Europe and Japan had to wait until February and March 2002 to experience this hulk of a console. This thing is big and heavy compared to other consoles, just look at this banana for scale. And of course, you can't talk about the Xbox being huge without mentioning the original Duke controller. If you put a Microsoft engineer at gunpoint and ask them what they were thinking when designing this thing, they'd probably tell you to pull the trigger and release the Xbox Controller S to replace it. I've never actually held the Duke controller before, so I can't compare how it feels to the Controller S, but even the smaller model doesn't feel fantastic. It's fine, it works, but it just feels slightly too wide to me. Definitely not a top tier controller in my book. The controller also reads memory cards despite the Xbox having a hard drive to store game data on. I reckon you'd put every person who's using an Xbox memory card into a room together and still have enough room for an original Xbox. The Xbox had a surprisingly good launch, surpassing 1 million consoles sold in just 3 weeks, which is no small feat. However, it struggled in Japan, mainly due to its high price and the already established competition of PlayStation and Nintendo. That's an issue, but the console carries somewhat everywhere, being the new kid on the block. If you bought a PlayStation, you likely already owned or were planning to buy a PS2, so why would you abandon that library for an unknown console made by Microsoft? But releasing so late after the competition actually does have some advantages. The Xbox had a few features that the PS2 didn't, like supporting native 720p, and some games even supported 1080i. Now granted, this was for a small fraction of the game's library, the majority was still in 480p. But this was incredibly impressive for a console released in 2001. Now, did anyone in 2001 actually have a HD TV? That time period is so far into the before then times that it's borderline prehistoric for me. I always thought people in the 2000s did cave paintings and hunted for mammoths for video games, so I always imagined it looked a little something like, holy shit, it's really the Halo. Much like the PS2, Xbox featured DVD compatibility, but it required a specific TV remote controller to play back DVDs. Now, if you point a gun at a Microsoft engineer's head and ask them what they were thinking this time, they'd have nothing to tell you. They never went back to change this. Meanwhile, the PS2 didn't require any accessories to do DVD playback, which made it a much more sensible option for anyone with a brain. But regardless of the resolution the game ran in or the weird controls it required, the Xbox had a killer feature that PlayStation had practically no answer to: Xbox Live. It is? Sega tried their hands at online services with SegaNet, but they were a little early to the party. Not only was broadband internet still relatively uncommon in the US back then, but the Dreamcast never really had a game that made people say, knock down the walls, Mum, we need to get this cable to the Dreamcast. It might also be because the Dreamcast died within 3 years, but in 2002, Ethernet cables started to grow on trees by then. Xbox could easily launch an online service and have people actually use it, and as well as that, Xbox also had a massive advantage compared to other online services: and he went by the name of Master Chief. Halo 2 revolutionised online gaming as we know it. While the original Halo, Halo Combat Evolved, didn't officially support online multiplayer, it did support system link functionality where players could bring 4 consoles together to play 4-screen split screen on each console, for a total of 16 players in one room. This became known as a LAN party, and it's what nerds do on a Friday night instead of socialising or wondering what the point of it all is like the rest of us. But Halo 2 brought Xbox Live functionalities to the series, and effectively created a genre of online console shooters. And Xbox Live also brought some of the first instances of paid DLC into gaming, with map packs being available to purchase separately. DLC, 2 out of 10 game for me, clearly unfinished, going in my burn pile. Games? Oh yeah, Xbox had games, and good ones too. Launch titles included classics like Halo Combat Evolved, Dead or Alive 3, Project Gotham Racing, and Shrek. And Xbox got excellent games throughout its life too, like Fable, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, Conker Live and Reloaded, Knights of the Old Republic. Wait, did you say Conker? But they were supposed to be an endgame couple! In the 5th generation of consoles, Nintendo worked closely with a company called Rare, who developed the Donkey Kong Country series, spin-offs like Diddy Kong Racing, and the ugly stepdaughter of the TK series, as well as original IPs like Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day, a mature 3D platformer which developed a cult following thanks to its humour. But in 2000, development costs started to increase, and Rare needed more funding to develop games. Naturally, a full buyout from Nintendo was expected, but Nintendo never does what we expect. You expect 1-2 Switch to be bundled with the system, they show you a £50 price tag. So Rare started to look for buyers, with the 2 notable bidders being Activision and Xbox. Take a wild guess who won. Microsoft officially acquired Rare on September 24, 2002. Since Microsoft obviously didn't want Rare to help its competitors sell systems, it blocked them from releasing and developing games for Nintendo's home consoles, the N64 and GameCube. That meant Rare had to cancel their upcoming GameCube project, Donkey Kong Racing. Sometimes I just sit and wonder what the world would have been like if Donkey Kong Racing had released. However, because Microsoft didn't have a handheld system on the market, Rare were allowed to continue development on handheld games for the Game Boy Advance, just none that involved Nintendo IPs like Donkey Kong. That was until they gave up on doing that in 2007 and released Diddy Kong Racing DS. In fact, it seemed like Rare produced more Nintendo handheld games than Xbox games, for only notable Xbox releases being Grabbed by the Ghoulies and Conker Live and Reloaded, from the ground-up remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day from the N64. It has a surprising amount of effort put into it, with all new models and self-deprecating jokes about remakes fucking stink. Now, where was Banjo-Kazooie, you ask?
Holy shit, it's really Banjo-Kazooie.
To accompany its acquisition, Microsoft also managed to make deals with other companies like Sega to produce games exclusively for the Xbox. They even managed to make Rockstar amend its exclusivity agreement with PlayStation to get games like GTA 3 to release day and date with the PS2 version. Even in 2005, as Microsoft approached the launch of the Xbox 360, games like Forza Motorsport and Conker Live and Reloaded launched, both high quality games with tons of effort and development time put into them. It was clear Xbox was fighting tooth and nail to compete with the PS2. And where did that get them?
Yeah, it didn't do much. But when you let the PS2 have a year-long head start in the console market, do you really expect Xbox to be able to compete? I think the Xbox did a great job at laying the groundwork for Microsoft in the console market and proving they could fully take the spot that Sega had left. Well, it didn't sell fantastically, and Microsoft actually lost $4 billion making the console. How was I going with this again?
All jokes aside, launching services like Xbox Live, pioneering HD gaming, and creating now classics like Halo, Project Gotham Racing, and Fable really showed people that Xbox was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Just not right now. Almost everything here had potential to be built upon massively in the next generation, where they ended up getting a head start on Sony with the successor to the Xbox called the Xbox 360. It launched on the 22nd of November 2005, almost a full year before the PS3. That system ended up building upon everything the Xbox did: a better Xbox Live, a full focus on HD graphics, a cleaner UI, video streaming services, the list goes on. Games like Halo 3, Gears of War, and the Call of Duty series spread like wildfire and popularised online video games as a whole, and when everything was said and done, Xbox 360 came very close to dethroning PlayStation 3 this generation, only missing out because of a last-minute 180 to pretty much what the PS3 was trying to be in 2006.
Well, it's done. I'm now a real gamer, as they say. But now my shelves seem so empty. I wish there was a way for me to be able to enjoy these games without letting people know that I'm a massive pussy. Oh my god, it's really the Nintendo.